Hi, I'm Greg Levine. I'm Managing Editor of Firedog Lake. This is the party line for May 27th, 2011, and I am here to talk budget. Hang on. No, it's not as bad as you think. I'm going to talk defense budget. Is that better? Well, I'll try to keep it short. Look, basically it's this. Bob Gates, who for another month, I guess, will have his job as Secretary of Defense, has been going around this past week making speeches, most notably one at the American Enterprise Institute, but a couple of graduation ones too, where he has stressed the need to make cuts in the military budget, but also stressed what you can and cannot cut anymore. Interesting, because Bob Gates has gotten some kudos from supporters of the current Obama administration because he is apparently more willing than your typical Pentagon guy to consider cuts to the bloated, ridiculous, ever-escalating, supersized Pentagon budget. But in this round of speeches, Bob Gates makes it very clear that the days of making easy cuts, you know, all those easy cuts they made this last year, those days are over. He says that, I think it's a quote, he says the low-hanging fruit has not only been plucked, it has been stomped and crushed, I believe is what he said. And what does Gates mean by low-hanging fruit? He means a couple of superfluous hardware programs. Interestingly, what he can't possibly be talking about is the bloated hierarchy of the military, the tens of little fiefdoms, all with redundant bureaucracies and highly paid senior staff, which he himself admits he has had very little luck in trimming or reforming. But that said, low-hanging fruit gone. So there are apparently external forces on our budget that require cutting, and the military is on the table, or so we are told. And hey, that's a good thing, but Bob Gates wants everyone to know that at this point you can't just go after programs anymore. In fact, he makes it very clear that you can't go after programs anymore. No, he says that the time for trimming the hardware side of the equation is done, because we won't be ready for all those unexpected wars we're going to need to fight in the future. Specifically, Gates makes it very clear that he wants a new aerial tanker. He wants the F-35, which is just re-estimated up another 30% or so, so it'll be over $100 million a plane. He wants a new ground vehicle, he wants a new aircraft carrier, and he also wants a new generation of nuclear-powered ballistic missile launching submarines, because you never know when you're going to have to do that kind of all-out war. So, that's all sacrosanct, that's all untouchable, that's apparently not low-hanging fruit. So what does Bob Gates, very serious, you know, inside the Beltway kind of thinker guy, suggest we do to trim military? He says it's time, most soberly, he says it's time that we examine personnel costs. Now, does he mean cutting the size of the military, like the number of active troops? Perhaps a little. It has grown immensely, even in the last couple of years. But specifically what he's talking about is examining pensions, examining pay, and examining healthcare costs. And by examining, he means cutting. He very specifically says that we're paying too much in military pensions. He says that the military's incredibly successful TRICARE program, it continues to be too costly and is getting more costly, and talks about properly evaluating pay so that the people in the most serious jobs get more serious pay than the people who, you know, are just helping the people in the most serious jobs, I guess. Quite specifically, as far as pensions are concerned, he's recommending that instead of qualifying for a military pension after 20 years of active service, that the requirement be that you actually must turn 57 before you can collect military pension. Now think about this. There are people fighting our wars right now who are 18 years old, And for them to claim their pensions, they have to spend another 20 years in the military. So they would be 38 when they could claim a military pension. But instead, Gates would like it if they could also stick around for another 20 years. And by stick around, that means maybe have to stay in the military because you need the job, or maybe have to stay alive, which could also possibly be a way of trimming costs, you know, because 20 years is a long time and things happen. So to examine again, hardware, money for hardware, good. Money for people, negotiable, right? Money for hardware, untouchable. Money for people, negotiable. This is not new, of course. I remember this back from the days of Cap Weinberger under Ronald Reagan. And you have to understand a key thing here, which is that when you buy a big piece of hardware, there's a company or a couple of companies, or the way military spending sometimes works, several companies scattered over many states that are going to benefit. And these companies make sure that everyone knows how thankful they are that they have been bestowed this giant chunk of federal tax money. And they make sure that everyone knows it in the form of, first, campaign contributions, second, something slightly less legal, cash and favors and junkets, and finally, they make it known by providing those revolving door jobs, those consulting gigs, those lobbyist jobs for people who have recently found themselves, you know, either turned out of Congress or retiring, or, you know, perhaps retiring as Secretary of Defense. People, on the other hand, say we take that same amount of money and we spread it across 1 million servicemen and women, and we pay for their medical care, and we give them adequate pay, and we give them combat pay, and we support their families, and we give them a pension that will take care of them in exchange for the incredible service that they've done. Each of those individuals would have to somehow find their way to reward all of these people who have bestowed that money upon them. And it just doesn't, it's not as effective a bang for your buck. You see, you give a big chunk to a defense contractor, and you know where the money went, and you know where to look for it to come back. You take that chunk and you spread it out over hundreds of thousands of people, and not only is it not as likely that it's all going to come back in the same direction, you just have no real way of you know, tracing it, marking it, making sure that you were rewarded for your incredible effort. So this is obviously not only true in the defense budget, it's true across the board in the federal budget making process, and that is the party line. Bob Gates, of course, will be doing something different in a month. Where do you think he'll be working? The VA? Or perhaps for a defense contractor? Rhetorical question. Thanks for listening.